We were about 6 months from green lighting the whiskey project. And literally we were back traveling in Ireland when I said to Serena, and I'll never forget the look she had on her face of like, what if we do tea?
I heard you have a wait list of employees who want to work there.
Yeah.
So how did you build that kind of culture?
Kevin Parker gave me this advice when he first joined our board. I'll never forget. It was some of the best advice I was ever given is...
Hi, Drew. I'm so excited to have you here,
yeah,
honestly.
Thank you.
Thank you. On your journey with Revival Tea, which is currently the fastest growing tea company in the country.
It's been a wild 6 years.
Yeah, I've been honored to get to watch part of it firsthand. Now, I want to give a little life update for me. Today, I'm showing up fully, the motto, done is better than perfect, and also reminding myself not to compare my chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. And Drew is going to be a great example of someone who only in 2018 was able to start his chapter 1 and 6 years later has had tremendous growth. So with that being said, I actually want to talk a little about how I know you. Drew is, when did we meet? 2011?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah, we met in 2011. And he is the husband to my cousin Serena. Mm-hmm. And when I first met Drew, he was working at, do you remember where we were working?
Probably in the car industry.
Yeah.
Either selling cars or selling finance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just remember they got married, and one day, 7 years later, you guys were like, we're starting a tea company. So can you tell me a little about what that looked like and how it came to be, why tea, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I started my first business when I was 18. Not coming from entrepreneurial parents. I started working for the local NBC affiliate when I was 16 years old. And that turned into me doing weddings on the weekends, and weddings turned into music videos, and music videos turned into me doing TV pilots for major networks. And I went from a kid with a camera that worked at a local TV station to having a business at 18 years old that I realized I wasn't ready for, but I think I liked it, and that I had a lot to learn and a lot to do. So I sold that business at 19 years old, which really just meant in that world, I sold the equipment, because you're going from project to project. And really, I spent the next decade trying to work on the things that I think I needed. Before I met you, I was such an introvert. I was a kid that was used to being behind the camera as a director that I couldn't even order a pizza. Like, that's how introverted I was. And most people who know me now today would never believe that. And a fun story, I don't know if I've ever talked about on camera before, is my mom actually went and got me a job after I sold my media company behind my back. We had a family friend that was the manager at a local Sears Automotive. And she said, I don't know about this whole I sold my company thing. To me, you're unemployed. So mama got you a job and you're going to sell tires. And so this introverted video director was forced to go sell tires at Sears Automotive. And I did that for a year, realized like it got me out of my shell. I learned how to sell and talk to people. And then I thought like, okay, what's next? And so I started working in the car industry. And from there, I actually got out of the car business for a while to open a Qdoba to get into the restaurant world. And 30 days into corporate training, was told they were no longer opening that Qdoba, that I could be an assistant manager. So I got sucked back into the car business, but I got like 30 days of corporate Qdoba training, which was really useful. And then spent 5 years in the car industry, starting on the floor, turning into a sales manager, turning into a finance manager, and then a finance director. And the whole time, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And towards the end of that journey, whatever chapter I was in at that point, I thought I was close. And we looked at actually opening a distillery. There was a history of my family distilling in Northern Ireland. And my maternal grandmother, who was a huge part of my childhood, huge influence, she had passed, and there was this big intrigue to like, we're going to do whiskey, and they got this family heritage. And long story short, I basically spent 6 years trying to figure out what the next thing was going to be. I ended up leaving. We were on our honeymoon to Dublin, and trips are very dangerous for me. I make like major life decisions on trips, and made the decision to leave the car business. Serena was in real estate at the time, and I got into mortgages. And really like did mortgages for 3 years while we figured out exactly what we were going to do. We were about 6 months from green lighting the whiskey project. And literally we were back traveling in Ireland when I said to Serena, and I'll never forget the look she had on her face of like, what if we do tea? She's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're in Ireland doing whiskey R&D. Like, we're doing this in 6 months. I'm like, hear me out. Like, are we doing whiskey because it's cool? Or are we doing it because there's a need? And I said, I drink 6 cups of tea a day, but I don't consider myself a tea drinker. How many other closet tea drinkers are out there that just don't know that, you know, it's cool to drink tea? So what if we did craft tea? And that conversation is really where Revival was born.
That's amazing. I love that story too, because it shows that in life we pivot so often. And a lot of times we think, oh, we had to find the one thing at the beginning and we can't change it. And life is a constant journey and series of changes.
Every day.
And wouldn't you say you learned a lot from all of those experiences that helped you start this company?
Big time. I mean, the last 6 years, I mean, have been constant pivots from, you know, when we started the business, we were going to be online only. We were only going to have one tea. And we pivoted to opening our first brick and mortar store because people said, you know, hey, we'd love to have a place to go. And it was overwhelming that like we felt like we weren't serving a major need. And then we decided it'd be fun to open a brick and mortar 30 days before the COVID lockdowns, which pivot, right? Like you have this envision of how it's going to go. You pivot to like, we're going to lean into brick and mortar, and then there's a shutdown. And so you pivot again. And yeah, I mean, I feel like that's really a lot of us who I think survived the pandemic, and a lot of us who are still growing today have pivoted many times from when we started.
A lot of companies would have shut down and closed their brick and mortar if that happened. What led you to be able to stay open? What's
funny is the truth of it is I think all of us, if we all look back to that time, I think all of us spent 30 days just like analyzing like what's going on? What is this? Like trying to just realize what's happening around us. And so the first 30 days, the honest truth is we like sat on the couch in the tasting room, looking at each other, like playing video games. Like, what do we do? Like we had the first 30 days, we had 4,000 people walk into our front doors. Serena and I were working 7 days a week. We were open from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. to the public. And we still needed to blend all of our tea, package all of our tea, ship all of our tea, do wholesale deliveries. And so we were freaking out, like, how are we going to keep up? And then we found out. And so when you go from 4,000 people in 30 days to you can't be open, we just kind of sat there on our hands for 30 days. Like, what do we do? And then you start to, you know, I think human nature is you start to react and pivot. And what we saw was that almost all of our wholesale clients at the time were coffee shops that were closed. And we didn't have many wholesale partners that were grocery or drive-through. And during the lockdown, like that's who was killing it. Drive-throughs were busier than they'd ever been. Grocery stores were doing really well. They couldn't stock enough on their shelves. And so we said, okay, we started as an e-commerce business. Let's lean back into that, but let's also purposely make some relationships in grocery and drive-through. And when we pivoted, we grew so much between, you know, really, I would say April of 2020 through the end of the year that we ended up needing more space to blend and package and bag our teas, which ended up leading to us opening a whole new headquarters the following year.
Wow. So I have a question then that I think a lot of people would have is, to have 4,000 people walk through your door in the first 30 days, there's obviously some strategic marketing that took place.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
Yeah, super grassroots. And so to kind of backtrack a little bit, in the end of 2018, we launched a Kickstarter. And the Kickstarter was to get pre-orders for our chai, which was our only tea. And we did $5,000 in pre-orders, which we thought was so much money.
I know, I ordered one of those. I ordered two, actually.
Yep. And from that, what we heard was like, do you guys have an Earl Grey? Like, I feel like the thing that we've done really well, and that's really what's taken us to today is listening to our customers, and eventually your company becomes your customers to a certain degree. And so like, do you guys have an Earl Grey? Do you have this? And it made us think like, well, maybe we should. And so we started doing farmers markets. And when we started doing farmers markets, that's when 1 out of 3 people would come up to us and say, do you have a brick and mortar? Oh, you should. Like, there's no good tea places around here. So after doing farmers markets for about 90 days, we said, let's look into doing a brick and mortar. And then we ended up, searching out, because we want to do craft tea. We want to have these whiskey vibes. And so we didn't want to just have like a coffee shop. What if we could find like a speakeasy tasting room? So we found a commercial real estate agent and we said, I know this sounds weird, but we want a basement space. And they're like, that does sound weird, but got it. And they came back to us on a property that wasn't on the market. It was actually owned by their boss. And he said, I don't even know if I can lease it to you, but let's go look at it. And it was an actual old speakeasy. And so it was one of those where we weren't ready or like dying to do a brick and mortar. But when we found the space and I walked in, I said like, this is it. This is what a Revival Tea would look like. And so as soon as we signed that lease, we said, okay, let's do on all these farmers markets, anyone that we touch needs to hear that we're opening a brick and mortar. And so literally between when we signed the lease in June of 2019 to when it opened in February of 2020, thousands upon thousands of people that we touched at farmers markets or like bazaars or grocery store demos, every single one of them was handed a card that said we're opening a brick and mortar location. We didn't know when, we just had an address and that we were doing it. And so by the time that we opened it up, all those people were primed up. And one of the things I think that we did really well was we knew we had kind of an empty arena and we needed to fill that arena with people. We didn't know exactly what we were going to put in front of them yet, as much as let's create an audience. And then luckily we crushed the brick and mortar. And so when we had something to present them, they were all thrilled with it.
So you didn't even build an email list or get them on any sort of list at that point. You're just saying, here's a card, here's an address, no idea when the date is, but we're going to be opening something.
That, and then I would say the other piece of it was having worked in the news. I knew how to create a press release. And so it's something that to this day, we still do really good, is making sure that not, you need to do it strategically and you need to do it in a way that's, you're not constantly bombarding news outlets with stuff. But we sent out a press release and we had all the contacts to send them to. So we were fortunate enough to also get some really good like local press around it as well.
Okay, that's amazing. And then supporting local. I don't know if you know this, but Fred Meyer's actually does all their test products in Spokane.
Didn't know that.
So they said if it can make it in Spokane, it can make it anywhere.
Yep.
And obviously you've made it very well here and you're expanding, which is really exciting. To hop back real quick though, do you think that you would have pivoted and gone so hard to pushing wholesale as fast as you did had the lockdown not happened? No,
definitely. And you got to be careful, right, when you talk about it. But what we said coming out of it was like, COVID was terrible for so many different reasons, but for us as a business, it was a bit of a blessing because it did force us to grow in areas we wouldn't have. And to your point, if the lockdown wouldn't have happened, we probably would have just kind of coasted on that newness of having this new store. And I would bet we're not where we're at today had it not happened. It definitely forced us to be uncomfortable and it forced us to grow in areas we wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, which is a powerful lesson.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we look at those things and we just see the negative. Oh, it shut down my, I've seen companies go both ways and you guys really took it and put a positive and great spin on it. So
thank you.
Yeah. So what's next? Talk to me. Where are you going? You're opening more locations. Mm-hmm. How many locations do you have now?
Yeah, we have 3 right now.
Okay.
Yep. And the intention right now is to open 50 over the next 10 years.
Okay. What's that put you at per year? On how many locations? And are they going to be corporate owned or are they going to be an opportunity for other people to own them?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so since 2021, when we moved into our new headquarters, like we moved into a 4,000 square foot facility that we built out from the ground up. It was the only tea manufacturing facility between Portland and Missoula at the time. And so we built that all out, and when we built it out, it was way more space and way more capacity than we needed. So we spent about 3 years saying, okay, like we have this infrastructure, but we don't have the revenue to support it. It's time to go get the revenue. And so we really spent the next 3 years getting as busy as we could, adding over 2,500 wholesale clients coast to coast, getting a real Amazon Shopify business going, opening 3 tasting rooms as well. And what we realized through that was we didn't get into this to be in the manufacturing world. Like those are the calls you get at midnight that a machine broke. We started to get purchase orders from distributors last summer that were larger than 1 month's revenue for us. And so after 3 years, we ended up like exceeding our capacity of our production facility. And so we had a crossroads where we said, okay, we're either going to open a much larger facility with way more square footage, way more inventory, way more people. Or what if we, like, it felt like maybe this was the only chance to ever do this. What if we focus on what we do well? What if we focus on what differentiates us from everyone else? And since we entered the tea space, like there's good tea out there and the branding of the tea world has changed a lot. But nobody to us has really done what we want to do with our brick and mortars, which is really creating a third space for tea. And so we made the very purposeful decision last year to offload our manufacturing, shift to a co-packing model, and just focus in on our brick and mortars. And so our plan moving forward and the way we get to our 50 stores is we're going to be opening 1, maybe 2 more corporate stores. They will have drive-throughs. We just launched a week ago, full espresso coffee bars in all of our locations, full build your own acai tea cups and toasts and all of that. And so got some really sound advice from someone that has a lot of experience in the coffee world earlier this year that said, you need to lean more into the ritual of the drink. You need to lean more into the habit of the drink and not as much into necessarily the retail side of bags of tea. That's a really difficult thing. So you look at what Starbucks has done, you look at what Dutch Bros has done, and they've really made, a habit around you stopping by and getting your 1, 2, maybe 3 cups a day. And so we're looking at a warmer climate. Phoenix, Arizona is the main area we're honing in on right now, and having a drive-through that has tea, has coffee, has food options, and then it will have a retail store as well. But the intention is that will be our last corporate store, and that we'll use that as the flagship for us to actually franchise out the remaining. So we do have a licensing agreement currently in South Africa that is supposed to turn into a franchise agreement over time because they want to open a chain of Revival Tea companies. But that's obviously in a separate country. The intention is once that store gets open, we would start to franchise out and do franchising agreements here in the US.
Okay, so can you walk me through the timeline? Because I think when we talk about it all at once, right, it's like, wow, this was overnight. But one thing I've always admired about you is you are extremely patient. You do the one thing for 1 or 2 years, and then you add the other thing and you stack. So can you kind of just give me that timeline all together, like 2018 to 2020, we were only selling, so that way people can hear and not just think, okay, I have to do everything at once.
I'm glad it comes across like I'm patient because it doesn't feel like that many times, and it's something I wish I was better at. 2018, we incorporate early 2018, end of 2018, we do the Kickstarter and do $5,000 in pre-orders. 2019, we start doing farmers markets. We start doing wholesale at that time, and then we sign a lease for our first brick and mortar. 2020, we open up the first location in Spokane, lean into grocery, back into e-commerce and the drive-through, grow our business so much during 2020. We need this new facility that we ended up opening in September of 2021. And so really between September of 2021 and I would say the summer of 23, which was a year ago now, our whole focus was go get more wholesale business, grow. We acquired the ice cream shop that was above our Spokane tasting room to open a boba bar, something we said we would never do. And we listened to our customers and leaned into boba. And then we ended up opening up our third store in Coeur d'Alene in June of 2023. And so during that time, that's what grew us into the fastest growing tea company in the US. Essentially, we doubled our business every single year. And while doing, double the revenue every year sounds great. It comes with a lot of challenges. And I think for us, it's kind of like you're going down the road going 100 miles an hour. And when you're going 100 miles an hour, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I think we made a lot of mistakes, some expensive, but we were able to learn from them. And I think in hindsight, we're really glad that we made them now and not, 5 years from now. And so, that's the timeline.
That's great. Would you be willing to share one or two of those mistakes that maybe would be a mistake that someone else could learn from?
Yeah. I love entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are the people who are taking risks. They're the ones that everyone tells them that it's not going to work. It's not the safe path at all. And I've had a lot of experience from family and friends doing that. And it's a very lonely road to take for sure. And so when mistakes happen, it can be very lonely to, you see a lot of burnout. You see a lot of, founders that, doing something for 6 years is really difficult. And we were at a place, because of some of those mistakes where I was like super vulnerable as a founder and kind of having a bit of like imposter syndrome, which is super common right in our world. And we got approached by a group that wanted to acquire us. And we were in a place that we probably weren't in the right mindset to make that decision. And we ended up signing a letter of intent with these people. It was a deal that was not a good deal to us. And thankfully, that deal fell apart at the absolute last hour because they needed more cash to close the deal. And when that deal fell apart, we had a chance to pivot like we talked about. And the lesson from it was when we were going through that M&A deal, we stopped doing the things that made us successful. And so the 90 days of going through diligence on that deal, that was almost the end of Revival. Like we were at such a bad place at the end of that because we stopped doing what made us successful, that the fact that we were actually able to turn the ship around, I don't think 99.9% of businesses would have. And it wasn't just us. We had some people step up who kind of grabbed us by the arm and helped us out. And there's a lot of people, mentors, people who are like on my board now that we would not still be standing here had they not helped us at that time. So I think the main lesson was, you see what made you successful and just keep doing that. Don't stop doing that. And when, opportunities come around, you got to make sure that they're unemotional and that they're not dictated by maybe outside stressors that had come before that.
Yeah, decisions made by logic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Removing that emotion. And then what would you say were the 3 things that you were doing right that you stopped doing?
Yeah, I think when an M&A deal happens, you get into the finances and at that time, because like when you're growing and building a business, which we've been doing for 6 years, you feel like you almost need to like put a halt to some of that during that. And so we actually, like a very specific example is, the number one job of most CEOs is extending your runway for a startup, right? Like making sure you have enough, capital to operate. And when you have access to capital and good capital, like you should take it. And we actually had an opportunity to take capital that we needed for growth. And these people who wanted to acquire us said, let's hold off on that. And we'll look at it on the other side of close, because they were acquiring the business, but they were actually acquiring me to run their beverage division of their company. And we turned down good needed capital to grow the business. And then when the deal fell apart, that was no longer there. And so we literally were sitting there with not much cash on hand because we were so focused on just getting to the finish line of the closing that we turned down money. We stopped prospecting. We stopped like adding new wholesale business. And the momentum that we'd built the first 3 years of the business came to a screeching halt that really took like 9 months post that falling apart to get going again. Mm-hmm. Luckily, we survived it. We made it to the other side. And I am genuinely grateful that happened, because similar to COVID, like we wouldn't be where we are at today without it. Mm-hmm. But definitely an expensive lesson for sure.
Yeah. Well, and with that too, it's just one of those opportunities to be, sometimes we think we want something. Was that kind of your version of throwing in the towel? Were you done? Was like there a moment when you thought, I'm just going to close everything down. This is exhausting. It's not worth it. Was that selling for you, or?
I never wanted to sell the business unless who we were selling it to I thought could take the brand further than I could, either with or without me. And so when the opportunity came, I was burnt out. I felt like I needed more like expertise on like this person, like this team has built things bigger than we have built. They must know something that I don't know. And I think it's like, we all learn it. Like there's no secret sauce. There's no secret that anyone has what builds any successful business. It's not sexy. It's not, anything that can be learned overnight. It's, I've said to multiple mentors over time that, gosh, I wish that like I could stop touching all the hot stoves. And they're like, buddy boy, like you're going to touch them. And that's the only way to learn. And so we were definitely presented that like, this was going to be a way for the company to go further than we could build it on our own. And that definitely wasn't the case. So.
Yeah. And we don't have to talk numbers specifically, but I always like to talk to people about revenue versus profit. What percentage over all of those years would you say was actual profit versus revenue?
Yeah. So when we opened the store in 2020, between all of 2020 and then 2021, which is when we move into this new production facility, we're profitable. We're not doing a lot in revenue. I mean, we're doing under $50,000 in revenue a month at that point, but we're making a profit. And then when we moved into this new production facility, you enter, a growth phase, and you need more space, but you don't need that much space. And so at that point, you enter a growth phase. And like a lot of businesses, the last 3 years, we were all growing our top line revenue at all means necessary. And we were being told by investors and banks, like, don't worry about it. There's plenty of money. And we were just growing top line revenue at all means necessary. Well, really the last 12 to 18 months, as that money started to dry up, it's harder to get investors. It's harder to get loans from banks. Every business has had to shift to profitability. And I think we're really fortunate that being able to pivot was so easy for us. We've seen businesses doing, $100 million plus go bankrupt, go out of business the last 12 to 18 months. I'm really thankful that we hadn't grown to that point, that we were still salvageable. And so for us, when we made that realization of like, okay, like we have to become profitable, we were able to turn 90 degrees and focus on that. And so we're really excited because at Q4 this year, for the first time since 2021, we'll be back to profitability. And I don't see us ever going away from that. I think that when you're profitable, you dictate your own future. And so we want to be in a position that like our growth, like we get to dictate the gas pedal. It's not based off of, if this VC is going to come in or what the market says. Like if you've got cash, like you can definitely drive at your own speed. And so a lot of businesses, us included now, I think are focused on being resilient. And we really proud ourselves in being the fastest growing tea company. And then we stopped pushing that because what we started to say was like, well, that doesn't matter. What matters is that we're the tea company that's still around in 100 years. And so our mindset's completely shifted to longevity over speed.
Well, and tell me if this is true or not. I heard you have a wait list of employees who want to work there.
Yeah.
So how did you build that kind of culture? Because that kind of culture is something that'll keep you around 100 years from now when you have employees and raving fans.
Yeah, that comes from my background as an athlete. Of the way I would equate it is a professional football team. If the quarterback goes down, they've got the backup quarterback waiting, but they've also got a list of guys that they've already, gone through the workout. They've already done all that they're ready to sign on a moment's notice. And so for us, the same thing, like, internally we have a saying that people are going to people, and myself included, like we're humans are so unpredictable. And you may have an employee who today's your best employee, and we all go through things, in our personal lives, and things change that you don't know month to month. Like someone 6 months from now, and we've seen this, right, may be a completely different person. And for us, like we know that we don't live to work. We want to enjoy what we do, but we work to do the things that we love. And we want to, do what we're doing and build what we're building with people who are passionate about it, that enjoy coming to work. And if you don't like going to work, like, how's that going to come across to our customers, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, what we've done is I wouldn't say that our hiring process is perfect by any means today, but it's definitely gotten better over time. Is we actually send out a questionnaire that when someone sends the resume and they say that, I'd like to apply for a job, we basically do the interview through like a questionnaire with questions that really weeds out about 95% of applicants. If you make it through that process, you get an interview. And then after the interview, if you make it through that process, you do what's called a stress test. And so we do this both in our tasting rooms and in manufacturing, where like, okay, cool. Like, we like you. You seem like a good culture fit. Let's see you work. Like, what's it look like to see you behind the counter? And then they actually get graded on that stress test. And the average from someone doing a stress test to getting a job offer is typically 90 days. And so that if that person passes the stress test, they just go into a list of people who are approved, ready to work. And for us, like, when you're growing as quickly as you're growing, there's always going to be chance for, employees to like move up and grow at the company. Mm-hmm. But, if, hopefully we're just adding because of growth, but sometimes we have to add because there's been like performance that's dipped, and, we bring someone else on at that time. So it's a competitive environment. For us to be the best, we definitely need the best people, and yeah.
Well, I got to know, what's the stress test? Come on, we're all wondering, what is it?
Yeah. So what we do is, one of the best compliments I've ever had about our teologists is that they're like camp counselors. And when we first opened the tasting room, people used to ask, like, what kind of people do you want to come in? And we're like, everyone. Like, don't be rude. Like, we don't care what your beliefs are. Like, leave all that at the door. Just come in and enjoy a good cup of tea. So we want people to feel very welcome when they come in. There's this thing in coffee culture that it's like cool to be a stuck-up barista. I hate that. Mm-hmm. And so anyone that comes in, we want them to feel like that first person that walked in the door on our grand opening in 2020, they need to get the same experience today at any of our locations that Drew or Serena gave them 4 or 5 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So what we do is we teach them our greeting, which our greeting is, we need to teach people how to shop from us. Have you been in before? If they haven't, we want to educate them. Like, we blend and bag all of our tea right here in the Northwest. All of our stuff comes tea bag and loose leaf. And then we want to teach them, like, you can get things straight, a latte, tea flights, tea mocktails. There's all sorts of fun stuff. And then all of our retail teas always buy one, get one half off. We teach them that spiel in the beginning of the stress test. And then we actually go back at the end and we act like we're the customer, and we have them greet us. Uh-huh. And we teach them about 3 teas. So we might say, like, hey, our chai is what we started the company with. It's got 9 ingredients, da-da-da-da-da. We give them 3 things. And at the end, we act like we're the customer, and they're supposed to know the greeting and the 3 teas. In between, we actually teach them how to make 3 drinks as well. And so they have a thing to look at. They have a tool to read instructions, but we just want to see, like, how do they make drinks, and how do they interact with our customers, and then they get graded on that.
So is it a one-day thing? Is it a multiple day thing?
The interview and the stress test can be separate days. So the interview is typically with like a district manager and a tasting room manager, and that'll last typically like a half hour, and then they'll bring them back like the next week to do about an hour stress test.
How many people pass the stress test?
I would say I'd probably put it about 10%.
Only 10%?
Yeah.
Dang.
No, I mean, when people reach out to us, the email they get from our team back is people email, are you guys hiring? And yeah. The email they always get back is, we're always looking for exceptional people.
Yeah. The competitive nature in me is like, I just want to do it. I don't even want to work there, but I want to see if I can do it.
It definitely, the stress test was the one thing we implemented years ago that saved us. I mean, hiring's expensive, training's expensive. Some of the best advice I ever got was hire slow, fire fast. Mm-hmm. And the slower we've hired, the better decisions we've made, for sure.
I think that's super useful. So how many years before you guys ended up, you ran it yourselves, you and Serena ran it for years? what year did you guys step out and start bringing in management and employees?
Yeah, no, it's funny because, 6 years seems like a long time, but it also feels like yesterday. And some of it like meshes together. And so, yeah, in 2020, when things were going crazy pre-pandemic, like we thought we were going to have to do that right then and there. And then it was just Serena and I for the whole rest of that year. When we opened the new production facility, I actually brought on a good personal friend of mine to, just help run that side of the business. And, at its peak when our manufacturing was running full circle, just that facility had 8 people working out of there. Each of our tasting rooms has a tasting room manager, an assistant manager, a lead teologist or 2, and then typically about 10 teologists below them. And then we have a district manager as well. So we're at a point as a business now. So one of our growth pains is we did balloon up to about 50 employees at one point, which was lot, especially at the revenue we were doing. And we were so focused on doing the appropriate labor to serve our customers. We knew, like Serena and I had never worked in a restaurant. We never worked in a coffee shop. We knew nothing about like labor to revenue percentages. We just figured it out on the fly. And then we were really lucky that we brought in Kevin Parker onto our board, who Kevin owns all the local Dutch Bros. He's one of the early Dutch Bros franchisees. And he opened up our hood and was like, your labor to revenue is like really bad. Like you need to fix that now. So we did. We were able to get all of that fixed. But now, we've got a director of operations that runs the day-to-day operations of our manufacturing facility. He has an operations manager, and then there's people that work underneath that. We now have, a full-time marketing person. Like I did all the marketing for a long time. We're at a point now that we're starting to bring in, we're not ready to hire, like, say, a full-time chief retail officer or a full-time chief marketing officer, but we're starting to bring in like fractionals. And so literally in the last 6 months, we brought in a fractional chief marketing officer, a fractional chief retail officer, and a fractional chief financial officer that we don't need full-time ones yet, but people who can help us kind of bridge that gap. And so really, long term, we're trying to do this as nimble and as lean as possible. Dutch Bros, they got to 250 stores with 6 corporate employees. And I think that's something to really strive for, of how can we grow the brand coast to coast with as few people as possible.
But then also having those key roles covered, because a lot of times if you try to have one person do too much of anything, right, then they get overworked. And so it sounds like you have a good system. Everything you said before with I don't even remember all of them, but those are still in place, or did you get rid of all of that? You still have all of them?
A lot of when we fixed our labor to revenue, what we found, especially on the retail side, is that we were having like 3 people do one job. And it goes to that whole like needing exceptional people. Is we had to raise our expectations a big part of like, no, like if you're going to work here, you need to be able to like really handle a rush on your own and that sort of a deal. Obviously offloading our production is a big part of that. But I think like the big lesson in all of it was when you do everything, like I wore all those hats, right? Like I remember when we started the business, I created a corporate flow chart and I put my name on every single one, right? And
that's how you start as an entrepreneur. It's part of it.
And I wore all those hats for many, many years. Like you mentioned, I think the big mistake that everyone makes, like I don't know if I've ever met anyone that didn't make this mistake their first time running a company, is you hire people into those roles and then you teach them what you know. And we've gone through that season of our business. And so what happens is like, I don't have a decade in marketing experience or a degree or anything like that, but I was doing it well enough. And then you dilute it down to you teach someone how to do what you know, and they're going to do it at like 50 to 80% of that. And so
it's more diluted.
What we've learned is like, we have to hire people that can teach me something. And so I'm not an expert in marketing. I'm not an expert in finance. I'm a founder and a CEO that knows enough about everything to be dangerous. And so I think the expensive lesson from that every founder I know who's been through this has done is you got to hire people that are value adds, that are going to teach you something about that area of the business. And we definitely went through a cycle of having to go through employees in every facet of our business that wasn't. And now we're getting to the point that we're bringing those people in.
I think if there was any one key takeaway for business owners, that would be it. Because a lot of times, like you said, you're like, well, I'm good enough at this and I'm going to teach you. And now it's more diluted versus getting someone who's an expert and can go take you to the next level.
I think it's also though, like, so someone can hear it. Like, I'm sure I heard that advice at some point, but it's a self-confidence thing of like, well, why would they come work for me? Like, if they're an expert in marketing, they've got better options, right? And I don't think it's about that. It's about finding people who believe in the vision that you've built, that, you know, if you can find a marketing person that believes in your vision, they'll take a pay cut to come be a part of that. Like, just because they worked at like a bigger company than your company doesn't mean that it won't be the right fit. And so I think that's a bit of it.
Yeah, that's a huge lesson too. The vision, selling the vision. So you now have, you know, in the past 6 years, 2.5 years ago, you had a little boy, Declan. Mm-hmm. So how has life changed since having, you know, growing a family?
Yeah. I mean, you know that adding a child to the mix changes everything.
Well, I've been a mom since I was 18, so I've had a child in the mix since the beginning.
Yeah. And like, I mean, just being a new parent's hard, right? Like, when Serena through her whole pregnancy was our hardest worker. I mean, she was standing at the production line begging teas 7 months pregnant. Mm-hmm. And I tell everyone this, when she gave birth to Declan, I lost my best employee because Serena's the hardest worker I know. Mm-hmm. And she was able to, anything that I needed, like picked up, she was able to do. And so it was more important to me that she be a full-time mommy and that she take care of our son for the first couple of years. Mm-hmm. She didn't really get a chance to come back working for us until about a year ago. The first year she was really full-time mommy, mm-hmm. Which we were fortunate enough to have her do. And then now, you know, she serves in a role of like my executive assistant, where she works about 25 hours a week. You know, she'll run payroll, she'll set up meetings for me, help pick up the slack that I need. But yeah, it changes everything, but it changes your perspective as well. I think like when you don't have a kid, it might be a little easier to fall into that hustle trap and mm-hmm. fall into the external stressors or influencers that might make you go in areas that you shouldn't or you wouldn't. I don't know about you, but like for me, having a son has really forced me to like be more authentic, and mm-hmm. it's forced me to you know, it sounds cheesy, but to like really realize what's important. Like I can have the most stressful day in the world in my eyes, and you can come up and say like the dumbest thing in the world to me, and you just realize like, yeah, it's not that important.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. And I think like it forces you to grow up, of course. And as a business owner, like the maturity that comes along with being a parent and the perspective it gives you of what's really important. Not everyone can, but if you can take that and apply it towards your business, like there's not a whole lot now that stresses me out, because, you know, being a parent and going through some of the stressors we've had of that, it's like, oh no, we'll figure that out. That's not that big of a deal.
Would you say you're a better leader now since becoming a parent?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, I feel like I'm still in chapter 1 of parenthood, where, you know, as we've got raising a kid's not till 18, right? It's a lifelong thing. And so I think that as we go through that journey together, I'm sure there will be plenty of things that are transferable to the business arena as well.
Did it give you more grace for people who have kids, like working, like, do you feel like before, because it's like, okay, of course you have a kid, you can do that and have a kid. It's not that hard.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I totally agree.
And then with Serena coming back on a little bit, do you feel like if you would have started out having a child, because I always say I was looking at founders and the most successful companies, and I was like, okay, I haven't really seen a lot of people who have done it while having kids. Because I think maybe it's all that grind and hustle in the beginning, or without a really supportive partner who was raising those children. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like if you guys would have started, do you think Revival Tea would be what it is today had you started with a family, and it's possible for other people to go build it with a family? Or do you think one parent really needs to have that, you know, home role and the other one takes on the work role?
I don't think if we had Declan when we made the decision to start the company, I don't think we would have started a company. And I had a really close friend of mine from the car business who's a manager, that he made a comment to me of, you're so lucky that you don't have kids, because I have 4 kids and I can't leave my job. Like, he had a stay-at-home mom. He's making, you know, good corporate America money. And like, he can't leave that. Like, they have a mortgage to pay and kids' tuitions to pay and all of that. I think we get trapped to a certain degree. Every time you go through like a hard lesson, you look at other people who have been handed such a tougher deck of cards, and they've done it. And so like, there are people who have 4 kids that did make that jump and do it. And someone like me, I look at them and be like, God, I feel like I barely made it. How did you do it? And so I think if Serena was sitting here, what she would say is that, for her, what was probably crazy was from the time she left the business to the time she came back, it wasn't the same business. We were people ask us a lot, like, could you have ever envisioned it would have gotten to where it gotten to? And the answer is yes. Like, we're way past this, but there was a moment, we were like 3 years in, that there was a month that we were within like $300 of our like projections from when we started the business. And so like, yeah, it was very intentional, but we went from a ma and pa business to when she came back, like, we were a big business. And I think when she re-entered it, it was a very different thing. What's been fun though is raising Declan around the business, and he's like just getting started, but he's been behind our production line already. When he was very young, he'd go in and like smell the teas and go, cute. Good. And he's been behind the bar, and he started to like greet customers and that sort of a deal. And so I think for both of us, for Serena and I, like, our first priority has always been being a parent first. And I think we've also just realized that like we're also, I think we're cut a bit different, that we value our personal time and our personal life a lot compared to maybe some hustle cultures, like, still cool, I guess. And we really value that. And so I think, to be honest with you, the toughest part in all of that is separating the business from the person. And I think that's something that we're just starting to get a grasp on, of that Revival was Drew and Serena for so long, and it's not. Revival is its own company that has employees and investors and is doing its own thing. And Drew and Serena are also human beings that have a separate life outside of it. And so I think and it's cool. That's like the next progression, I think.
Because it's your identity for so long. It's like, I'm Drew, I own Revival Tea, right? It's like, what do you do? It's not what I love this when people go, what do you do? And we immediately in America go, well, I work here, here, and here. And it's like, that's not really who you are.
It's not, I'm a mom.
Yeah. And so I think there's so much power in stepping back and pulling your identity away from what that maybe job or company is. But it's hard when you're an entrepreneur too, because it's your blood, sweat, and tears. So
I've given advice to a lot of entrepreneurs that I'm like starting to take back. I'm like, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Is I've said forever, I'm like, if you want to make it, it needs to be the first thing you think about, first thing when you wake up, and the last thing when you go to bed. And if you do that for X amount of time, you'll make it. And now I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, that's not true. So.
But we all have to go through there. I loved watching Gary Vee's transformation in a way of his content. It was like hustle, clouds and dirt. And now he's like, it doesn't matter. It's about the people. It's about kindness. It's about empathy. But I think that's, as you grow as an entrepreneur and you have family and children, it's just part of the process. And you can tell someone like, don't go do these drugs, it's bad for you, but you kind of need to learn on your own.
Well, and he shifted to like, if you don't like it, like, what are you doing? And Kevin Parker gave me this advice when he first joined our board. I'll never forget. It was some of the best advice I was ever given, is your business needs to serve you. You've served your business for all this time. Your business needs to serve you. And as we've started to restructure our business, we've been very purposeful and intentional about making sure that our business serves us more than we serve it.
100%. No, that's beautiful. And I think that's a great note to go and end on, because a lot of times we build this business, we build it into our identity, and then if we sell it, what do we have left? And then a lot of people end up depressed, they've given up relationships, and so I just think that's a really powerful reminder to end on. But is there anything else that you would maybe want to add that you think might be valuable? And share?
Yeah, no, I mean, what we're doing right now, I would argue is the coolest and like biggest thing we've ever done as a company.
Okay.
And, you know, we've done last year for the first time ever, we brought on outside investors. We did like an angel VC round, and we really used that to build out like our board of directors and bring on expertise to our table, which has been great. And, you know, we started this whole company with a Kickstarter. We started this whole company with people like you ordering chai from us that we were shipping out of a little commissary kitchen in the valley, and putting little mugs together and all that. And literally, like, over the last 18 to 24 months, like, I get 1 to 2 emails per week from people that are like huge fans of the business. I really believe in what you're doing. Are you taking on investors? Like, how could we become a part of this? And the system in the US for investing is kind of screwed up, because unless you're a public company, you can't take on non-accredited investors, and you have to be an accredited investor. And that's normally like a $25,000 to $50,000 minimum check size, and you have to have a, you know, high net worth. And so, like, I can't write a $25,000, $50,000 check to any startup that I like, but, you know, I would easily support a lot of different companies with what I could. And so we came across, you know, what a community round was, a Series CF as they call it. And it's not a Kickstarter, it's not an Indiegogo, it's an opportunity for people to invest in your company and get real shares in your company. So we ended up launching a round just over 30 days ago on WeFunder. And what it does is it allows our fans, our followers, our community to come along this journey with us. And I'm so excited because, like, we wouldn't be where we are at today without our like loyal fans and customers and supporters. And so the fact that we get to build this together, we're not just out chasing venture checks, we're not just taking money, we're actually bringing our fans with us. And so we're running it right now. The first 30 days we've raised just over $225,000 from, I think, 160 different investors. We did make a decision yesterday that we're actually carrying the round into next year. So it'll go through April of 25, and really we're gonna kind of make the big goal of raising about $1 million as a company to really help fuel our growth and be a part of this journey with us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So people can go to WeFunder and Revival Tea, and then where can they find you on social? And we'll put all the links below as well.
Yeah, so it's WeFunder /Revival Tea. We put together a video that really sums up what these last 6 years have looked like, you know, where we came from, where we are, and where we're going. And so a really cool story there. It is, you know, it's a mini IPO, so you have to get SEC reviewed financials, and so all of that's in there as well. You can invest as little as $250 to own a share in Revival Tea Company, and then that has all the social links on there as well.
That's amazing. What an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think it's WeFunder's saying they're what are they saying, that they're changing capitalism forever. And so I think it's pretty cool that normal people can invest in these cool startups. So
yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Well, thank you so much. If you guys are ready to join the Revival, go below, click on the links and go invest or buy the tea and follow them on social media. Thank you so much, Drew. I appreciate you coming on today and for all of this insight. I think it's going to be extremely valuable for everyone.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.